Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. As always, I'm Brian Doyle here with you, and I hope everybody's having a wonderful summer. I know that I've been doing a little bit of travel, enjoying a little bit of the sun and the fun before we all get back to the real grindstone as we head into the school year. But, I hope that you're all finding a little time to rest. This is an industry that definitely struggles with the concept of work-life balance. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here because we've got a very special guest, and I want to introduce Robert Gillette, founder of MSP Dojo, to the call today. So, Robert, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Oh, gosh. Thank you so much for having me.
I've gotten to meet Robert through some mutual folks out in the marketplace, and I know many of you listeners might be familiar with him as well. But he's doing something pretty cool over at MSP Dojo. And before he dives into that, though, as you know, I always love to hear everybody's backstory and how they came into the crazy world of MSP.
Oh, yeah. Gosh. So, total accident is the answer. Grandpa was in sales, dad was in sales. I didn't want to do it. I ran from it my whole life and found myself in my 30s with as a jack of all trades, master of none, really trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, so to speak. And a friend of mine kind of headhunted me to come work for an MSP in a sales role. And it just kind of hit me in the right moment. I was looking for something dramatic and a good change in my life. And I said I'd give it 6 months. And the CEO there was able to convince me that basically everything I'd been doing my whole life was sales. If I just learned to accept it and reframe it into what it really is, when you're doing consultative sales, when you sell a consultative product, it can be one of the most powerful and one of the most maturing things you can possibly do once you understand what it really is, which is helping people make choices, getting them unstuck from wherever they're stuck.
Amen.
And inserting. And so it just unlocked everything for me in my mid-30s.
Well, I think, there's a lot of that concern around, sales can be a 4-letter word sometimes to some people, right? And we've come up with all these wonderful titles to almost be anything except sales. But I used to always say, at the end of the day, when I showed up at the customer's site, he sat on one side of the desk or she sat on one side of the desk and I sat on the other. And there was no denying what each other's roles were in that moment, right?
Pretty much.
So couch it how you want to. I think one of the beautiful things about the MSP community, like you said, is we get to be consultative salespeople. We really can guide people as much as we're selling people within this process.
Yeah. It just kills me every time you talk to someone. They're like, well, I'm not I'm not in sales. I'm an educator, or I teach people. And it's like, cool. Yeah. But at some point you ask them for money though, right? Like, you don't just do it for free. And so that's one of the big things that I think is really missing from the MSP space is if you can't come to grips with that as a person, that means that it's going to always be an awkward, tense moment for your prospects or even your clients. When at some point you ask them for money, if it's weird for you, it's definitely going to be weird for them.
And it's something I think, obviously as junior sales reps come into the fray, it's tough, especially when they're meeting people that they might be a little bit intimidated by because they're further along in their career than some of us that have been around for a while. And you realize everybody across the table from you is just like you, once was in your spot and also puts their pants on the same way. That the reality is we're all speaking from the same language and we know our roles, but it's tough, right? It's tough to get that confidence. And, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that before we're done on this call today.
Oh, I suspect. Yeah.
I find one of the coolest things I've ever heard was, I had the fortune or misfortune, we can dialogue on that later, but of working in a Fortune 5 healthcare firm for a while. And, I was fortunate enough also to be high enough on the ladder that I got exposure to literally the CEOs and CIOs of our organization. And as a result of that, one of the things that stuck with me too was the CEO saying, "What's my job? My job is merely to be the biggest salesperson we have here. I have to sell confidence to our shareholders. I have to sell out to the largest customers that we work with that we can maintain what we're doing for them and be better to continue them renewing with us. And I need to find those new major companies that I meet in all my different walks of life, like conferences, and get them somehow to take a meeting with our organization. And that really resonated with me because it was one of those things the CEO was saying, that's why I have all the lieutenants that manage the day to day. My job is to make sure people are coming. And I think you as a salesperson, if you kind of take it of the, I'm the CEO of Me Inc., and this is what I got to do to build my business, it could change the way you look at sales. I know that was one of the things that changed my view on sales in some
Absolutely.
respects.
Yeah, and that just lines up with some things like there's a book by Daniel Pink that talks about to sell as human, and kind of this
Yeah.
idea that, my paraphrase of that is, if you at any point need to convince a human to allocate resources, attention, or action differently than they do now, then you are in sales.
Yeah.
That's all sales is just trying to encourage people to change some type of behavior or allocation of resources. And pretty much everybody does that. It doesn't matter if your job is, trying to get a new client at the right MRR or get your kids to eat broccoli. At some point, you're trying to influence or change behavior.
I was just going to say, you learned it as a kid when you were trying to get candy from mom and dad. You learned it again as you were starting to enter the dating world and you were trying to get somebody to say yes. So each and every one of us has definitely been in a selling position, whether we knew it or not along the way. But, at this point, Robert, it's probably a good place where we can probably start transitioning into what MSP Dojo can do for the sales community as well.
Yeah. So thanks for that. The MSP Dojo is, when I looked around and I tried to understand what I could do. I spent 7 years helping an MSP grow from $10 to $30 million in revenue as their lead
Which is
sales
huge.
executive, which was one heck of an experience in the Silicon Valley. Trying to convince techies that they need tech support was a unique experience. But when I left that job after 7 years and it was time to figure out what to do next, the obvious answer was either start/buy into an MSP as the sales guy or an owner, or do sales coaching. And I wasn't ready, or just was kind of burnt out. I didn't want to do the job again. And so I started doing sales coaching, and man, it's a very crowded market. There's lots of people that will tell you what to do. And I knew almost instantly I wasn't going to find some amazing new take on that. There were some voices I really liked already in the channel, especially ones that were just starting out. I didn't want to really try and compete with.
Yeah.
But what I did find is there was absolutely no place for someone to go and practice what they were learning. And the marketing version of that is, if you want to hit home runs, someone's got to teach you how to hold the bat, where to stand, how to spot the pitch, follow through, run to first base, right?
Yeah.
But then you have to see 1,000 pitches, and you can either do that in the game, which is expensive and embarrassing, or you can go to the batting cages. And so the MSP Dojo is the batting cages. It's where we could get together and practice what we've learned around sales so that we can be confident in doing it.
Well, you're hitting upon the things that we've all heard, right? The 5,000-hour rule to become an expert, or anybody that's played any sports, it's repetition, doing those reps over and over, are what gets you the outcomes you want. I think, as we head into that, you hit me with a stat that honestly shocked me a little bit before we turned on the light today. And that was really about the current state of MSP sales departments and what's the reality of what's actually coming in that new to a new organization. So maybe you want to touch upon that one a little bit and kind of elaborate where that intersects with that practice theory.
Yeah, well, so I want to be clear. I'm not a statistician. 87% of all facts are made up. I'm sure you can. But when I first set out on this journey for the MSP Dojo, I did interview 100 MSPs and just ask them lots of questions about sales and marketing. And one of them was like, how many first-time appointments have you set in the last year, in the last 12-month period? Like, how many prospects did you sit down with that you've never talked to, that are in IT support, like they're on IT pain and they need a new vendor or MSP or something? And it was like 85% of them had fewer than 10, or were like at 10. I remember thinking, like, how could you possibly be any good at something you do once a month? It blew my mind. Because especially coming out of the full-time role as a sales guy, I had averaged like 120 a year.
Yeah.
And I still felt like I was still learning after 7 years at 100-ish a year. Like, how in the world could you get good at something you only do once a month? It blew.
Well,
yeah.
I want to dig into that number a little bit because I
Ah,
think that it's important to also think a little bit about how leads and how sales come, right? So you talk to 85 random or excuse me, 100 random MSPs.
mhm,
I'm sure some were owner led, some had
mhm,
sales teams, they were all variants,
yeah,
right? And really what we're saying here is not just 10 net new sales calls per year, but that's what's coming in through the referral channels as well as outbound sales potentially across this entire mix
mhm,
that you had. So, I want listeners to really think about that number. When you start thinking about, other conversations we've had on the show about exit planning and getting to
mhm,
certain growth modes and things like that, just think about your average contract value per customer. You're going to see 10 of them. And if you're a Hall of Famer, you're getting 3 of them, right? It's the old batting average 3 out of 10 kind of
mhm.
thing. What is that really adding to your business? And is that enough to get you to your end goals?
Yeah. I mean, and there's whole we can dive way deep into the metrics around this, like the difference between a referral led
Yeah.
sales process and a marketing led sales process. What's the difference in how you sell to a referral that's been given to you by a client or is referred to you by a center of influence like their accountant? Like all these little nuances
Right.
matter. And again, you can if you do one, client referral this quarter and a marketing lead next quarter, it's impossible to build any kind of repeatable process that you run because you're a human, not a machine. So
Yep.
you've got head trash and you've got your own rust you got to shake off. It's just impossible to get any kind of consistency or quality in something you just do that little.
Yeah. No, and I believe strongly in that because you're spot on, right? You look at referral based because I'm sure some people laughed when I said 3 out of 10 because they're like, I'm closing 6 out of 10. But if they're all coming to you through channels, there's already a warm lead there, right? If
Hmm.
we focus on that marketing based approach, 3 out of 10 would be probably a pretty strong
Hmm.
number for true cold
Yeah.
processes there. But when you talk about that practice component, right? You're right. If you're just showing up on game day 10 times a year, there's really no way to refine your approach. We talk about athletes that come back from an injury and how it'll take them a week to really get back in the groove, depending on what
Hmm.
sport they play. Well, think about if you're just showing up once every month to do a new sales call and you have to remember your whole approach model and try to be consistent with it. I can't see it being done. So, Robert, tell us a little bit about how you've started working to guide and help people with that process.
Yeah, so it's pressure and process. So the first thing is, you have to have a process for how you're going to consistently do those at bats. So the MSP Dojo, that's a big part of it. We get together every week and we practice one of the 52 most common sales scenarios. It's nothing, magical or new. A lot of them even sound pretty similar with just different spins on them. So it's about just having a disciplined process and how do I divide up those scenarios? How do I space them out and consistently just get at bats,
Yeah.
just visiting the cages. But the other part it's important to recognize is that like there is a human component to this, like I said, where you mentioned the word earlier, and confidence is the number one thing we're trying to figure out here. It's just how do you be confident in what you're doing? Because if you're bad at this, your prospect isn't going to tell you.
Yeah.
They're just going to tell you you're too expensive or something wrong with it with another vendor, or they'll ghost you, and you're not going to get any feedback. So the other component to this is not only are you practicing one of these scenarios, you're practicing it with your peers, people who do what you do, and they can point out specifically where you're bad at it. And we play not just the role of the seller, but also the buyer and the coach. So for an hour every single week, whoever's responsible for meeting with that new client at an MSP is going to be saturated in role play exercises around a specific topic for an hour. It's an hour of active participation. And they're going to walk out of that meeting with just a greater confidence in both their own sales ability, their own, what I call then the sales confidence, like just the air you can present that I know what I'm doing and I'm not freaking out. And then very specifically, they're going to feel like they have a good tactical script that they could run against any particular scenario that comes your way. Like We literally just this past week, and maybe this will destroy the evergreen nature of this podcast, but just this, like literally an hour ago, we got out of practicing the scenario. Hey, you guys don't use CrowdStrike, do you? Because that's definitely a question everyone's going to be getting. Well, how do you use that moment to cause differentiation between you and the other vendors they're meeting with? Before, like 2 weeks ago, it was, hey, we'd love to use you, but you're really expensive. And you may think you have a good strategy on how to handle those questions, but is it tested? And have you done it out loud? Because everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And so, when you go do this with your peers who can call you on your BS, does it work? Do you work? Are you good at this? Can you feel comfortable? That's realistically what we're testing, is that sales muscle in general. And then, sales tactics specifically.
And I think working out that sales, muscle is critical. I'm a big fan of role play, like even over in the world of ECIO Toolbox, when we're doing ramp camps, those folks are doing a role play of those QBR presentations. So it's not the first time they're going out to do it. So, no matter what walk of life you are in technology, there's probably a level of role play that you should be conducting. But in sales, you really need to get that process down so it is muscle memory. So you can make rebuttals on gut and feel and previous know-how, and you're not thinking through that objection right there on the spot, trying to figure out how you're going to combat it. So, kudos for you for tapping into kind of an underserved market, which is the salespeople. I know I've known Robert for a little bit now, and we've had some previous conversations. And one of the things I've always found interesting about this industry is oftentimes the sales reps on an island alone inside the MSP. They are a team of one, maybe 1.5 if you throw the owner in there. And they don't have people they can role play with. They don't have people natively there that understand the plight of the salesperson and the fact that rejection is a part of success. And these things can really weigh on somebody. So, I think, what you're doing with role playing probably reinforces some of that, but maybe you could talk a little bit again about, where that is really an advantage coming to MSP Dojo for that single man sales team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that single man sales team, again, I would throw the owner operator in there too, because most people can't afford or haven't had a lot of success hiring that single salesperson. And one of the reasons why they struggle is because they're just not a good example worth following. You put a salesperson in the team and expect them to perform better than you as the owner. That's really unlikely. And that's an expensive endeavor to get wrong. So, one of the things I believe is so mission critical is that if you are operating again in that silo, it's like singing out in the woods by yourself. You may think you're pretty good, but you put them in front of an audience and you're going to get an objective measurement of whether or not you can hold a tune. And we have that same experience. I've had people join the dojo and say, well, I don't really bring my silver bullets to the room because my competitors are here and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's, a very interesting mindset that's holding back their success. Because if you can't test those silver bullets against people that also have their own silver bullets, it's you don't know if they work. You just know that sometimes a prospect buys and sometimes they don't.
Yeah. And, I think holding back is one of the most interesting things you hear from anybody, because when you look at the MSP community, we generally do, the same kind of work, just in different regions, right? Yes, we might have our little different spins and secret sauce, but at the end of the day, it's there. And if you're a salesperson, and I'm sure you do some level, at least, Robert, of kind of keeping people from next door neighbors, at least not showing up in the same session, so to speak, there's no reason why you can't be totally transparent. Everybody can learn, and nothing that we're saying in the sales environment is not something we haven't heard from some guru or sales pro in the past, right? I joke around, I haven't had an original thought in 25, 30 years.
Yeah, seriously. There's nothing, I don't know what the first job in the world was, but sales was probably the second.
Yep.
So, and it's really funny we mention that because competitors comes up all the time. People ask me about that. And my very first 12 members were all people I personally knew from my network in my market. They were all direct competitors.
Wow.
That I had stolen business from, and they had stolen business from me. It was like a little gang we formed of some people that were directly in each other's noses. And what we found is it helped us actually get better at our own differentiation. There's this, one of the big evil secrets about this industry is that, we aren't as different as we would like our clients to think we are. We often use a lot of the same tools. We follow the same gurus. One of the few things that we have at our disposal is understanding ourselves, how we're actually different than our competitors. And one of the best ways to sharpen that is to just get in the room with them and talk with them. There's a guy named Alex Rader that runs the Bay Area IT group here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And it is a thriving community of competitors that are in this. They've got a Slack channel where they're literally giving each other referrals and asking for advice. And I don't believe separating competitors actually helps us close more business in any way, shape, or form.
No.
So I actually encourage people, if you get the chance, get in the room with your direct competitor and figure out how the two of you can explain how you're different in a way that a CPA could understand. You'll both close more business.
I always had competitors that I called cooperators as well,
Mm-hmm.
because the reality is most of us as MSPs, especially when we're in our growth trajectory, we don't have every skill set we need.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, we need to farm out and have trusted people we can bring into our environment and know that they're not going to work to take away our environment at the ready as well. So I had a lot of competitors that I was able to network with and do some of this role playing with, because we were trying to work together to win. You know, my Cisco guru over here while I managed systems, right? And each one of us didn't want to cross over the other's field for a while. And, you know, it was great. So I'm glad to hear you're seeing a lot of that happening in your area. But you tend to be in a progressive area of the country.
Well, yeah. With us Californians, it's but I would just encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're still a little skeptical about the, competitor collaboration kind of thing, I would just encourage you to think real hard and long about that. Is there any way you could actually be adding value by collaborating with people who you're going to run up against in the market anyways?
So, let's take a moment here and talk a little bit about what happens when I show up at the dojo. What should people expect when they show up for one of your sessions?
Yeah. So we have there's some added value I'm not going to talk about that you'll find in the platform and other meetings and stuff like that. But realistically, this is all it comes down to. On Thursday, you get an email that explains what the scenario is for the week. It's fully fleshed out, so you understand what the rules are. There's going to be a video about 20 to 25 minutes long of me and two other black belts, people who I know are good at this, demonstrating how we fall in the mud and would handle it if we were the salespeople in the seat. And they don't get a lot of preparation. We just dive right into it. There's no editing. If they trip and fall on their face, you're going to see it. And I think that's authentic and relatable. Yep. So that comes out on Thursday. It's an email that goes out to everyone on my subscriber list. I have some open office hours on Friday where you can come get your pre-practice in, or if you don't have a coach, you can ask me questions. But then Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, there's more times coming, but 10 a.m. Pacific is the main one. You get into a Zoom room, and for 1 hour, you're going to be in breakout rooms going through multiple iterations of playing that role of the buyer, the seller, and the coach as you work through the meat of this objection in a role play with your peers.
So basically, to be eligible to go through that, all I have to do is be a subscriber to your overall MSP Dojo net.
Yeah, you got to give me money, and you pay some money. You show up. There is an onboarding course.
Pay to play, baby.
We have some quality control so that you don't fall into it. Again, it's not uncommon to have members sign up, take the onboarding course, need a couple weeks to get comfortable before they show up. But if by your third week after giving me money, you're not in the program, you're not actually in the drill, you're getting calls from my assistant. They're saying, hey, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Because so many people sign up for something. And this is why the draw of marketing and programs is so strong, is we want to give money as owners to solve problems. But realistically, if you're like most MSPs, the owner is the problem. And you have to work on yourself. I hear from marketing companies all the time, lead generation companies, where their number one reason why they lose clients is because they, for 6 months, set up appointments that people don't show up to or blow off or say, well, they're not a good fit because the prospect had an objection. And then the appointment setting company loses a great client, even though they've done everything they've promised. And so we're the exact opposite of that. You're going to spend money and I'm going to require something from you directly. It is a you do it yourself kind of program.
Yeah, I mean, look, accountability is probably one of the biggest challenges for all of us. And in the MSP world, not like many other industries, of course, as well, but we can be pulled in many different directions during the course of the day. And, no 2 days necessarily look alike. But that being
Mhm.
said, if you can get somebody that's bringing part accountability with a program that can drive value, that's a
Mhm.
win-win for that end user. And kudos to you on that, being good enough to say, look, if you're going to give me money, I'm going to make you work. And if you're not going to work, I'm not going to take your money, because
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of the coaching industry is not yet taken. They're happy to
Mhm.
take money from people that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And it's tough because you don't want to ever define what is considered help for people and
Yep.
what is not. And so I'm always careful to, I don't like canceling accounts, but I do. I think what's most important for me is managing the expectation. And most things about sales is about managing expectations. What are you going to experience and what is required of you for this to work? And I think we have to, just as MSP owners, come to the grips that if we want sales to drive, if we want new client revenue to drive the growth of our business, which, by the way, I don't know how you actually get a valuation you want without figuring out this problem. If you want new client revenue to help you grow your business so you can get the exit you want or accomplish whatever your goal is, it's something you are going to have to figure out first. Then you can bring other people in, but you have to figure out how to solve this problem first. Sales is going to be the last thing to go from your plate.
Well, you're hitting on something huge there, because Abe Garver, who from Focus Investment Bank, who's kind of one of the leading M&A specialists, shared something on this on our platform about the fact that companies that have a true proven sales methodology and can prove that they're making acquisition sales and not just doing bolt-on revenue jumps through true M&A events, are getting as much as 2x on top of what the standard return is.
Mhm.
So, everybody is hungry in this industry for a sales engine. And if you really want to make yourself marketable, figure out how to build that sales engine. Don't fall into the trap of 10 net new sales a year. Figure out how you can triple up, quadruple up, or even further on that number, and then get your practice reps in. And kudos
Yeah.
to you to really find a hole in the
Mhm.
marketplace, Robert.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. It's
Wish I
fun.
was there. Wish I
Surprisingly,
was there
people.
when I was
Yeah.
fully selling. You know what I
Yeah. Well,
mean?
I joke around that, if the ice cream cone everyone wants to buy is more better leads, the raw head of broccoli that no one wants to eat, is you just need to get better at sales.
Yep.
And it's not an easy task. It's not an easy thing you want to eat. It requires direct, usually from the owner, time to dive in and actually get better. The good news is that incremental gains in this area are actually really good. If you truly looked at those 10, first time new client appointments that you set, even doing one more every year is a big gain in the early days.
I was going to say, just doing
Yeah.
15 instead of 10 would mean that you should see a
Yeah.
50% increase
Yeah.
over your usual year to year. It's not,
Mhm.
it's not a whole lot to get a bigger
Yeah.
number going. So
And doubling your close rate is a whole lot easier and cheaper than doubling your leads.
cool. So, Robert, we're getting near the end of our time here. I've had your website up here. So anybody that wants to go see and learn more about what Robert's doing here, head over to mspdojo.net. But I want to make sure that, that anything else that you've got going on that you want to make people aware of, that they know where to find you and how to get these services, or if you're going to be out at a trade show or somewhere else in the marketplace, where they can come up and shake your hand and learn more.
Yeah. So LinkedIn, I'm trying. That's the only social media I'm on these days, is my LinkedIn. If you wanted to come see me in person, I think the next event I'm doing is actually ScaleCon in Vegas. MSP Camp and Tech Tribe are putting that on. It's the first one. I have great confidence that this is going to be one of the best, if not the best, sales and marketing event for our space in the channel all year long.
Well, you got
I've sat with Taher, who's setting it up, and I know some of the speakers he's put together. The financial incentives he's set up between sponsors and speakers and attendees is fantastic. I think it's going to be one of the best. I think the second year it's going to knock people's socks off that they unseat IT Nation or something crazy like that. It's going to be fantastic.
Well, I mean, I think one of the nice parts about that conference, just looking from the outside in on that, is two go-givers are running it. Between
Mhm.
Tahir and Nigel, they are really out
Yep.
there big about giving the knowledge they know to the people that they can get to, and bringing the right people in to support that. So it is going to be an interesting conference. And I know in talking to many conference attendees these days, they are really looking for the conferences that are going to bring them bona fide value and let the speakers speak about what the speakers are best at.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a whole day dedicated to marketing, tactical. How do you actually do it? A whole day to sales, and then a whole day to doing something. So the last day of the conference is a whole day of action. Like, don't just take the stuff and go home, do it here and be ready. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah. And I think we could probably close with one stat we didn't get to today, which is 98% of you out there have spent at least $2,000 in marketing in the past 6 months. If you didn't see a return, it's your fault. So phone up and get better at sales, man.
Like I said, it's a whole lot easier to double your close rate than it is to double your leads. And that's just, and they result in the same thing. So client revenue.
Well, Robert, I really appreciate you taking some time to join us today. I think you've really shared a lot for people to think about during our time together. And, certainly if you are a salesperson and you're struggling, the biggest reason you're struggling might be you're not getting enough swings like we've talked about today. If that's the case, head on over and go see Robert.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great show.
You bet. Well, folks, we'll be back again next week. As you know, you can get our podcast anywhere you download your podcast, or come visit us up on YouTube as well. And Robert, again, want to thank you for joining us and look forward to talking to you more in the future.
Honored. Take care, bud.